Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. And tonight I am doing another book review episode. As always, you can find all the links to the shows, along with links to social media, ways to donate, and ways to contact me, at the podcast page, which is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions, or if you have stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're your own or they're from others that you trust. Happy to either read those or have you on the show with me to talk about them. And tonight I'll be reviewing two books. They're not terribly long novels, and the descriptions aren't too long, so I think I can handle that. And so there will be spoilers, just to put that out there right away, because I always forget. But part of that is also just the fact that I'm trying to summarize novels here, so definitely still recommend checking them out. And they're actually both sequels to books that I've already reviewed before. So, and they both have Stephen King in common. One of them is also written by Peter Straub. I'm not sure how you say that. And that is, I guess I can start with that one. That is the sequel to The Talisman, which I reviewed a while ago. And that book is called Black House. And I guess I can start with that one. So, again, there will be spoilers, but this is just a summary and just a look at the paranormal aspects of the story here. So, and this one also has ties to the Dark Tower series, which I reviewed. Took me quite a while to do that, to review that whole series. But it has ties to that as well, or at least connections to it. So, again, this is a sequel to The Talisman, which is a book about a boy who learns how to travel to this alternate parallel kind of world in order to find this talisman object that will save his mother's life. And also he needs to keep it away from his uncle and this other reality's version of his uncle who want to use it to take over all of reality, basically. And that story talks about the consequences of traveling between these two realms that can happen in various ways, including massive energy transfers and or explosions, which is really amazing to think about that. It kind of, in a way, almost makes sense if you're dealing with transporting something and then possibly even the air around that something and the energy around that something from one realm to another. That's a lot of energy going on there. So that's what that first book deals with. Now this sequel takes place years later. The boy is now a young man, and he has gone into the line of a police detective. So let's see here. The book starts out with a series of murders. Again, this is Stephen King. So just in case anyone is not aware, these stories are also horror. They're paranormal, supernatural horror. So of course I don't get too graphic, but King sometimes does. But anyway, so this book starts out with a series of murders in a town called French Landing in Wisconsin. So this is kind of a outlier here. This does not take place in Maine, as so many of King's books do. And the murderer is nicknamed the Fisherman due to an effort by the killer to emulate to copy the methods of the serial killer Albert Fish, where basically this killer is a cannibal, and also of course ends up killing children. Mentions 2 victims here. I'm looking at the summary here. 2 victims have already been found as the story starts, and then a third is discovered soon after. So, due to the severity of these crimes in this area, which is not used to a lot of crime, people in the area have become more anxious and worried about this whole thing. And of course, local media mentions here escalate things as well, with basically just trying to make more news, get more people to buy their products. So then the story cuts to Jack Sawyer, who was the boy in the Talisman and is a young man now in this book, and he's repressed a lot of his memories of his time in that other world, that other realm. He's repressed a lot of those memories, just because they're so strange, and a lot of it was, again, that was another horror book, so he went through a lot in that one. Definitely check out that earlier episode of the show. And but even though he's not thinking about all this anymore, there are still they still influence him, and they've led him to become a policeman. He ended up becoming a lieutenant in the LA Police Department, and he did really well there. But then there was a series of murders in LA before, and they lead to a farm insurance salesman that is actually from French Landing, Wisconsin. And so that's how Jack becomes associated with this town where this current string of murders happens. And but in this earlier case, he cooperates with the police and this town to capture the killer. And while he is in Wisconsin, he falls in love with the area, and it reminds him, even though he doesn't necessarily think about it, it reminds him of the territories in terms of the natural beauty of the area. And but he that place stays in his mind even after he goes back to LA. And so in another case that he's investigating, certain details of the crime scene start to unlock these memories of his from before. And they lead him to retire from the LAPD. Excuse me. And he moves to French Landing to just basically try to deal with all this that's going on. It's technically a early retirement kind of thing, apparently. But then, of course, that's when the Fisherman ordeal starts in French Landing, and the police there start to talk to or try to convince Jack to help them with this. And at first he refuses because his memories from the past, from this other world, all these current events are starting to bring them up, and he doesn't want to remember any of these things. And he's afraid that involving himself in this investigation might drive him insane with all these memories that are coming forward that he tried to ignore. And but the fourth victim is discovered, and that's what drives Jack to actually join the investigation. And there are almost paranormal like elements to this the series of murders, partly in the way that this killer is able to commit these crimes and then just escape. Um, that lead Jack to think this is more than just a regular killer, in that there's these otherworldly aspects to it. And so eventually Jack figures out that this killer is working for a familiar character from the Dark Tower series, the Crimson King. And he's this killer's job is to find children with the potential to serve as breakers. Now, if you remember in the Dark Tower series, breakers are these people that are forced to, with their minds, eat away at, or try to destroy these energy beams that hold all of reality together. And so this killer his job is to find kids that may be able to do this job, or to do this, break these beams. But then, of course, in return for this job that he's doing, the ones that turn out not to be able to do that, they become his victims. And that's how that whole deal works between the Crimson King and this killer. And but this there's a new disappearance, a fourth victim, who vanishes one day, and it turns out he does have this ability, and it's so strong that the Crimson King and this killer are drawn to him, even without knowing who he is. And so, and the secret about the way the Fisherman is able to escape all the police is that he is able to go between those two realms, and to take out these or to carry out these crimes, and then to leave the regular, or quote unquote real world. And Jack has to stop him. And of course, the story goes on with a chase and a series of events related to that. And really, that's the basis for that whole story. It's a really good book. Really interesting. There are, again, like I said, mentions of the Dark Tower and the and of Roland, the gunslinger, and his group. This book sort of suggests that, or hints at the whole idea of King's version of like a multiverse, and that different people in different places through various psychic or magical means are able to know and follow what's going on. And also, it's unclear in this book when this takes place in terms of in relation to the Dark Tower series. Because if y'all remember, at the end of the Dark Tower series, the Crimson King is stopped, even though he is not completely destroyed. He is left just literally as his own eyes are all that are left in reality, just floating in space on an outside balcony of the Dark Tower. So it's unclear what is going on here. Again, though, this Crimson King is known to be extremely powerful in the metaphysical and magical and energetic realms. So it's not impossible, I don't think, for him to be manipulating things, even if in that one realm he can't move around. So yeah, that's a pretty good summary of that book. There's a lot more into it, and I definitely recommend checking it out. And again, that is also that's a Peter Straub as well as Stephen King book. So very good book, and I think that covers that. So I have one other book here to review. These two books here that I'm talking about tonight also, as far as I know, they are the only sequels to other books outside of the Dark Tower series. um, there are parts of other books where stories continue, but these two are the only ones here, Black House and Doctor Sleep, that are entire books that are sequels to previous books. So let me just get a drink of water real quick, and then I will move on to Doctor Sleep. So one moment. Okay. So again, this is this next book I'm going to review is called Doctor Sleep, and it is a sequel to The Shining, which most people know about by now, thanks to the two on screen adaptations of it. And so let's see here. So this book again, this also is another book about a character that was a boy in the first book, in The Shining, and in this book, Danny Torrance is actually much older. He's, I believe, in his 30s. So, excuse me. Now, even after the events of The Shining, that of course had a major influence on Danny's life, and he and his mother live in Florida, but many spirits that used to stay in the Overlook Hotel have followed him and still want to find him and eventually take his energy in retaliation and revenge for the loss of their home, which is really a fascinating idea in a way. So, and so Danny, of course, all his life here has still has these abilities, and he's had to make what are called in the story mental lock boxes to contain these spirits or these energies that are trying to drive him insane. And so he always has these in his mind. And so now, as an adult, Danny goes by Dan. That's just his short version of his name. And it turns out he has similarities to his father in terms of his anger and alcoholism as well. So, due to trying to escape these memories and these abilities he has, Dan spends years moving across the U.S. And he eventually finds himself in New Hampshire, and he wants to give up drinking. So he settles in a small town in New Hampshire, just on a hunch that he has, thanks to his abilities. And he tries to make a life there. And he starts attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. So his abilities have been suppressed by his drinking because of the effects it can have, and he's able to, now that he's not suppressing these abilities anymore. He's actually using them to provide comfort to um, patients that in this hospice home that he's working at. He basically helps them pass on, leading to this name that other employees in this place have given him, which is Doctor Sleep. And also, of course, another just a minor detail in this book, but there's also a cat in this location that also seems to be able to sense when someone is about to pass. So, and that's something that has been suggested in a lot of places as well. Just that idea that cats can do that. So Dan is actually one of two main characters in this book. The other is a young girl. She's born in 2001. Her name is Abra Stone, and from the time when she was born, excuse me, she starts to develop and show powers of her own when she's able to predict tragedies in the world. There's also one amazing scene in the book where this isn't really in the summary here, but the parents hear the piano playing, and even when there's no one there, and they figure out it's always when Abra is awake. And so let's see here. So yeah, it's really amazing. This connection between these characters. So she ends up making a psychic link with Dan over time, even though she doesn't know about it. And for a long time until she gets older, and her ability grows even stronger than what he has. So, and they eventually meet in the story. Now, there's one other group of characters in the story that you encounter. One night, Abra has this dream, a psychic dream kind of deal, of the murder of a young boy by a group of some half immortal nomads that have their own psychic abilities. And this group of people, not even really, they're pretty much monsters or creatures disguised as people. And they call themselves the True Knot, KNOT. I believe just to indicate that they are working together at all times, both physically and psychically as well. And what they do is, excuse me, they travel around the U.S. and they feed on this energy of, or the psychic essence made when people who have psychic abilities die in pain. So they're basically murdering psychics as they travel around the country, and then they take that energy that is released from their victims. So now, thanks to this dream, the leader, known as Rose, also picks up on Abra and comes up with a plan to kidnap her. And around the same time, excuse me one moment, got a frog in my throat or something. Okay, so at around the same time, the group starts to notice that they're developing a human disease known as the measles that they actually got from their last victim, the one that Abra saw in a dream. And they believe that Abra's energy can cure them. And so the so Abra, of course, is frightened and asks Dan for help. And so Dan learns of all this of what's going on with this Rose and the True Knot. And so what they want to do is try to keep this group from killing, or from capturing and killing Abra. And they at first they think they just have to fend off this group of monsters once to get them to leave Abra alone. But in fending off this first group of them, Dan realizes and figures out that now that they know of Abra, they won't stop until they have killed her, or until they're all gone. And so let's see here. So apparently, another thing that Dan learns from Abra's grandmother is that Abra is technically his niece, because Abra's mother, at one point in the past, had ended up sleeping with Jack Torrance. I believe it was not a case of her knowing that Jack was married. It was another one of Jack, who is Danny's father. Jack's less than great qualities. But so, and then eventually this grandmother passes away after telling Dan about this. And of course, this explains somewhat how Abra has abilities. I'm guessing in that it's somewhat it can be a genetic thing. It comes from families. So let's see here. As meanwhile, as this True Knot group is dealing with this new disease that they unfortunately cannot easily fight, they become more desperate, of course, and the group ends up splitting up. More and more people start deserting it, even though they can't really do anything to save themselves, because they're not really human in a way. So of course Rose becomes even more desperate now that she has less followers, and everyone starts to head to the location over in Colorado where the Overlook was at. That's where actually the True Knot has been staying for a while. And because at this location where the Overlook used to be, there is a campground. And it's owned. That's what it was. I forgot. The True Knot actually owns it. This campground. It's part of how they maintain their existence through financially through this property. So there is a final confrontation among between Dan and then this group of these monsters, and he eventually the story ends with him seeing his an apparition of his father in this last fight with Rose. So and that's basically how the story ends, with the end of this True Knot group. So it's really an amazing book, and of course it ends with Abra just trying to adjust to this new life, or to life with powers, basically, and Dan helping her remotely as he can, and So it's a really good book. I think that basically covers it. There's, of course, a lot more to it than I was able to describe there. And yeah, both are really good books. Definitely recommend them. Um, and I think that covers everything. So tomorrow I will be covering paranormal news, and there will be a bonus show either Friday or Saturday. You will know um, once I have figured out what day that's going to be. And thank you all for listening, as always, whether you are here for the live streams or you listen to the podcast and YouTube channels. So, and yeah, have a great night, and I will talk to you all tomorrow night on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.